Running shoes are not important. Okay, now that I have your attention, before you get too angry, allow me to explain my somewhat inflammatory statement. Now, if you've been following my content for any length of time, you may have noticed the conspicuous absence of anything really talking about running shoes, which is unusual, right? For a physiotherapist specializing in running injuries to not be talking about shoes all the time, or even really hardly ever, is kind of unusual when you look at, other influencers and that kind of thing online, where you'll find lots and lots and lots of content about running injuries and running shoes and how important it is to make sure that you're in the right shoes. So, how come I never talk about it? Right. So that's what we're going to discuss today. And what I'm going to try and do is give the proper context for why I don't talk about shoes so much, which is not to say that they're not important at all, right? That's not really what I'm getting at, but I want to give them the proper context of how I think about running shoes and their role when it comes to running injuries. So I often talk about the three critical components when it comes to pain-free running, okay? So we've got strengthen the structures, build the muscles, and refine the technique. And if you were to look at like what we're trying to do there's three things. We're trying to look at the resilience of the structures. That's the first one. The strength of the muscles and the biomechanics. So we have resilience, strength, and biomechanics. Now, each of these critical components has different factors underneath it that will have an influence on it. So if you think about resilience, we're talking about the toughness of the various structures. So let's take the knee. We've got joint cartilage and bones. We've got ligaments and tendons. The resilience of those structures to tolerate the pounding of running will have a huge influence on whether that person will get injured and how they will recover from that injury. And the resilience of that structure is going to be influenced by lots of things. It's going to be influenced obviously by like the amount of running they're doing. It's going to be influenced by how hard that running is. It's going to be influenced by like how long they've been running. Other things like the intensity, how they're recovering, what their sleep is like, their stress, their diet, even their mental health. All of these things are going to have an impact on their health, which is going to have an impact on the resilience of that structure tissue to tolerate stress and then have an influence on whether you'll develop an injury or not. And then we've got muscular strength. And then there's different aspects to muscular strength underneath that critical component, right? So we have the just pure strength of the muscle. We have the endurance of the muscle. We have the power of the muscle, which is like how fast and hard it can contract. And then we have other sort of slightly more nuanced parts, like the stiffness of the muscle, the stiffness of the tendon is particularly important. And then with biomechanics, underneath biomechanics, there's various factors that will influence it. So your running technique, like the way you move, will obviously influence your biomechanics. The terrain that you're running on, the length of your bones, your flexibility, and your shoes. These are all things that will influence the biomechanics, which is one of the three critical components. So how come I don't talk about shoes and the way they influence biomechanics and why that's important for injuries, either avoidance or recovery? Why don't I talk about that very much? And it's because of something you might call like the priority pyramid. So if you take the three critical components, they're not all kind of equally critical, generally speaking. And this is obviously like case dependent, but on average, you can prioritize the three critical components kind of like a pyramid, right? So the base layer would be the resilience. The resilience or the toughness of the structures to tolerate stress is the most important thing that will dictate how you recover from an injury and whether you'll get injured in the first place. The middle layer, that's going to be your muscular strength, because that's going to have a huge impact on how much force is going into the structures. So the muscular strength is like the next most important thing. And then finally, the peak of the pyramid, that's your biomechanics. So relatively, you can imagine the base of the pyramid being the resilience is much more important than the peak of the pyramid, which is the biomechanics. And so because of this priority pyramid, if you have really good resilience, so let's say your knee, the structures of your knee, the back of the kneecap, the cartilage, the bones, they're all just healthy and strong and tough, and they can just handle loads and loads of pounding and stress. It doesn't really matter if you don't have perfect running technique. If you're running in a way that puts a bit more stress on that area, it doesn't matter because it's just so resilient, it can handle it. Conversely though, if you, let's say you had perfect biomechanics, so you had perfect running technique. If you have like very little resilience or no resilience because you haven't been running in years or you've been on bed rest or something, you're going to get injured like really easily. So even though your biomechanics are perfect, if you have very little resilience, your chance of getting injured or your ability to recover from an injury is like really, really low. Sorry, the chance of getting injured is high, but your ability to recover from the injury, that's low. And that's why when we're working with injured runners, trying to get them back to full training, we spend most of our time and energy and attention on the bottom two layers of the priority pyramid. On the three critical components, we prioritize resilience by strengthening the structures and strength by building the muscular strength to support the structures. And then we'll only spend a little bit of time on biomechanics, but we still work on it. We don't ignore it entirely, but we just apply our attention differently on those three layers because of the amount of influence they have on your ability to recover from a running injury. And then going forward, it's the amount of influence they'll have on whether you'll get injured or not. The most important thing is to have really good training and really good recovery and a really good diet. So you have really good resilience and toughness in the structures, because then even if you let your muscles get a bit weak, or even if your biomechanics suck, the toughness in the structures, they can just handle it. So make the structures really tough, make the muscles strong, and then try and look at the biomechanics as kind of the least important. Sounds wrong, but relative to the other two, it is less important. So if your training is perfect and your muscles are really strong, if your biomechanics aren't that great, you'll be okay. Which is why, because shoes are only one small factor that influence biomechanics, which is the least important, relatively speaking, of the three critical components. That's why I don't talk about them that much. And because I don't talk about them that much with my runners, because I know it's not the thing that's really going to move the needle for them. We have to get the training right. We have to get the recovery right. We have to get the resilience right. We have to get the muscles stronger and be able to attenuate more of the forces. If we do that and then we work on their technique, so their running technique is really good and they can run with good biomechanics no matter what shoes they're in, even if they're not in quite the right shoes for them, their biomechanics is still good, then we've still hit all three of the three critical components. And then it doesn't matter that much what shoes they're in, as long as they're comfortable enough for them to run in a way that they've learned how to run efficiently, and they have crazy strong muscles, and they have really resilient structures, they're not going to get injured. So although shoes get a lot of airtime, right, when you're looking at like running related content online, relatively speaking, when it comes to recreational runners who are injured or looking to avoid injuries, right, which is you listening to this, there's just more important stuff to work on. So it's not that they're completely unimportant, but relatively speaking, you would do much better to focus on the bottom two layers of the pyramid, on your resilience and your muscular strength, and then work on your biomechanics by working on your running technique, and then worry about your shoes. And when I say worry, to be honest, when you put it in this context, because they're only quite a small factor when it comes to running injuries generally, it kind of takes a bit of the pressure off them, right? You don't have to be in the perfect shoe. You don't have to worry when you move from one shoe to another that it's going to throw everything off, because you've learned how to run well, because you have crazy strong muscles, because your joints, tendons, ligaments, and bones are really resilient, right? So it's okay if you're not in quite the perfect shoe. And then you can just go and like pick shoes that you like the look of, right? Pick shoes that feel comfortable to you, that you like running in, and don't worry so much. And it's usually good to have a variety of shoes as well. So not just being obsessed with getting one specific type of shoe. And honestly, for me, if you look at my cupboard upstairs where the running shoes are, they all look quite different. And that's because I focus my attention on making sure my structures are very resilient, my muscles are very strong, my biomechanics, my technique is good. So then I know if I'm not in quite the right shoe, I'll be okay. So I can get the ones that I think look cool or whatever, or the ones that are on sale, or I can have some minimalist ones and some that are more like maximalist with lots of cushioning. And I know I'll be okay because I've got everything else in place underneath that. and then I can just have fun with my shoes. I can just wear the ones that I like. Now, that being said, the shoes, like, they do have an impact on your biomechanics. And sometimes with runners, we will ask them to look for a specific type of shoe, particularly if they've got an injury in the like foot or lower leg, and we look at their biomechanics and we think that a certain shoe will help with that. But it's not the most important factor, right? It's not as important as the resilience. It's not as important as the strength. And in most situations, it's not that important overall. So we want to focus on those important things first and foremost. And as well, like, if a shoe is going to be a problem for a runner, it's usually really obvious. It's like, I bought these shoes like 2 weeks ago, and my Achilles tendon started hurting like immediately or within a few runs. Like, it's really obvious when shoes are the problem. And the thing is, runners don't usually come to like physios and stuff with that problem because they just think, oh, well, that's the wrong shoe for me. And they go and get a different shoe. And then the problem usually goes away. And it was like something specific about how the shoe like pressed on the tendon or something like that. And like, unless you have a really obvious connection with the shoe in a painful area, then it's probably not the shoes that's causing the problem. So if you're trying to get back from like a running injury and you can't get back, then if you've looked at your shoes and you've maybe worked on your technique, you're on the right track, but there's more to look at. Okay, look at your muscular strength, look at your resilience. Those are the other two critical components that won't really be influenced by shoes. So if you're not sure how to do that and you want help and you want to talk about your running injury and where you've been with it and what it might look like if you need our help to get back from it, which of the three critical components might be the problem for you if the shoes are not the issue, then just click the link in the description and book a free call, and we'll have a chat and see what's going on and whether we might be able to help you do that.